everyone, this is Jean from Happy Indulgence, and today I'm going to be sharing with you 6 of my favorite Asian inspired reads. My whole reasoning for this is because May is Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and I wanted to share with you a lot of my Asian own voices reads, and I think that's important because obviously I'm Asian and reading stories that are close to my heart is really important. I wanted to make sure that they were own voices reads, which is really important, especially when it's about another culture, that it's from someone from within that culture because they're writing with authority, so they know what they're writing about. Also that they're sensitive to the needs and the stories that are told and making sure that they're authentic. I have read a lot of Asian inspired reads that aren't own voices, and sometimes I've been either incredibly disappointed or I found the representation to be hurtful or non-existent. So I prefer to read own voices reads, especially when it comes to reads about your own culture or your own identity. That's not to say that people from outside that certain identity or cultural identity can write about it, but I just think that it feels more authentic this way. Without further ado, here's 6 of my favorite Asian reads. So the first one is When Dimple Met Rishi by Sanya Menon, and this is a YA contemporary read about 2 teenagers in America, and they're basically Indian and they're arranged to meet one another through their parents. So it's kind of like the contemporary version of an arranged marriage, but not really. So you've got Dimple, who is a developer, and she's really passionate, she's really headstrong, and she will do anything to reach her goals of becoming a developer. And then you've got Rishi, who's a hopeless romantic, and these 2 teenagers are basically arranged to meet with one another, and when they meet it's completely hilarious. Like, Dimple actually punches Rishi in the face, which obviously isn't appropriate, but it makes for like an awkward situation that's really hilarious between these 2 teenagers. So I really liked how it stayed really close to the Indian heritage as well. So Dimple is like your typical Asian American, so she's Indian American and obviously doesn't really want to know much about her own heritage because she feels like it's forced upon her by her parents. Whereas Rishi actually believes that it's important to encapsulate his culture and he's happy to educate others about it, especially since it's not something that they understand the importance of. So I thought this was a really great book, particularly about people who are living in a Western country who are from another culture, such as Dimple and Rishi. So it was a really cute read. There's lots of Starbucks, there's lots of Bollywood dancing. It really feels authentic and I loved it. Next one is Freedom Swimmer by Wei Chim, and this is actually a Love Oz YA read, so it's an Australian author, and Freedom Swimmer was actually inspired by Wei Chim's own father back when he was younger, obviously. So it's set in Mao's communist China. It's about a friendship between Ming and Li. So Ming is basically a village boy who lives in communist China, and he befriends a red guard who is called Li, and together they learn about each other's lives and they bond over swimming. So Li actually teaches Ming how to swim, and basically they have really different lives but they have shared dreams. They want to escape communist China together, and that's obviously what Freedom Swimmer is about. So it's about the boys trying to swim across to Hong Kong, and it's also about back in the day of Mao's time, you didn't have a lot of freedoms. You know, there's no freedom of speech. The red guards come around and punish people and they're basically like enforcers pretty much. When you think about it, it's actually quite dystopian. So it's a really different and confronting world about poverty, about freedom, about 2 boys' friendship and bravery. And I absolutely love this book. It's completely heartwarming. I actually cried at the end of it. And it's just a really great book that really just makes you think about the Chinese heritage as well and about Mao's China and tells you about the history as well. So I really like this book. Next one is The Astonishing Colour of After by Emily X.R. Pan, and this is actually about a biracial teen who's Taiwanese American, and she's grieving the loss of her mother who dies by suicide. So there's obviously a stigma attached to that, especially in the Chinese culture. So what she does is she goes back to Taiwan with her father to learn a bit more about her heritage, and that's where she meets her grandparents, and they're obviously mourning her mother and they're going through grief and dealing with the stigma of mental illness, which isn't well accepted back in Taiwan. But what I really liked about this book is the flashbacks that it features, in that it shows you Lee reliving her childhood basically and thinking about moments with her mother, and she looks at them in a different light when she's in Taiwan, and she learns about her mother's childhood. So there's a bit of a magical realism aspect in that there's like a red bird that follows Lee around when she's in Taiwan, and she believes that it's her mother's spirit. So it's a really beautiful and enveloping story. I haven't read a story told quite in this way, and it's really beautiful and delicate, and I love hearing about how she learns about her important heritage when she goes back to Taiwan. You'll really get hungry for night noodles. Not night noodles in particular, but you know, like noodle markets, and yeah, it's just a really beautiful read that I really enjoyed. Next one is American Panda by Gloria Chow, and this is actually a contemporary read, and it's about a girl called May who is also Taiwanese, and she's actually a freshman in college. She's 17 years old, but she's obviously skipped a grade, and she actually falls in love with this guy called Darren Takahashi, who is Japanese. And for you guys who don't know the history between Chinese and Japanese, obviously there was a lot of history there when it came to the war. So Darren pretty much doesn't make May's approval list for her parents. There's a lot that she's dealing with here. In addition to fitting in with college, she's dealing with her strict parents and them judging her on what she wants to do in life. So they basically want her to fall in love with a Taiwanese guy and become a doctor. And unfortunately for May, learning science and becoming a doctor really isn't for her. And she also has to deal with an estranged brother as well. And she's close with her brother, but her parents don't approve of her meeting up with him because of things that he's done in the past. And yeah, so May's pretty much their last hope in being the perfect Chinese daughter pretty much. But now she's really struggling against their expectations, and I felt like this was a novel that I really related to because, you know, growing up, your parents often dictate what you should and shouldn't do, and it really can affect your self-confidence, especially if it doesn't align with what you want to do as well. And I thought that was really captured in here, and there's also some really awkward and funny scenes in here. Like, it's written in a really hilarious and witty way, and May pretty much has some really dry humor and it's really hilarious. You'll get hungry for dim sims, and it's really heartwarming as well, and there's a lot of family drama, and I think it was just a really enjoyable read. So yeah, that one's American Panda. And look what's under the cover. It's dumplings. It's so cute. Now for some fantasy reads. So I've got Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan. It's about the king's concubines. There's 8 girls who are often selected each year to become paper girls to the king. But this year there's a 9th girl because she has golden eyes, and her name is Lei. They get taken to the palace with the king and are obviously training to, you know, become a paper girl, and apparently it's like regarded as the highest order, especially for girls who aren't born into royalty. But for Lei, she sees it as it is. She sees it as abusive and insult to who she is as a person and to femininity, and I think that was really interesting as well because you don't often see it that way when it's like a high privilege to do something. So Lei comes in and challenges everything that she goes through, and she gets herself in a lot of trouble, especially when it comes to the king. There's a lot of really dark scenes in here, especially when it comes to sexual abuse and to rape. So I'm really glad that this novel actually delved into that and talked about it as well in a non-confronting way but in a respectful manner. There's also 3 different casts, which is also really important. So there's the paper cast, who are fully human. They don't have any animal demon features. There's the steel cast, so there's partial animal features, and then there's the moon cast, who are fully demon. That basically shows where you are in society, and if you're fully demon, that's where the king is, you will never become equal to someone in the paper cast. So I thought that was a really interesting aspect to the book. So I thought this was such an important read, especially because it talks about becoming a concubine, which is so rooted in Asian history that is pretty much never talked about in modern day times. So I thought it was explored really well. There is also a really fantastic LGBT relationship in here between Lei and another girl called Ren, who's like a mysterious girl that sneaks away at night, and Lei just becomes totally enchanted by her, and I thought that was done really well. It was just really fascinating to see her defiance against the king and everything that she achieves as well, and just how she like really sparks fire between each of the different paper girls. And it's interesting to see the dynamic between Lei and the different paper girls. There's people who will stand with Lei and say, you know, it's not right what's happening, and then there's other people who think they're privileged and asking her not to rock the boat. So that was interesting, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel later this year. The next book is one that I really love, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And this is actually an adult fantasy read, even though it features a character called Rin, who is actually a teenager at the start of the book, but by the end of the book she obviously gets a bit older. But this is in no way a YA book, so there's heaps of trigger warnings for this. Basically anything bad that can happen in war, this book will go into really graphically in chapter 21, so later in the book. But I really love this book because it's like inspired by modern day Chinese history, and it's set in the opium times, so where opium was dealt, everyone smoked it. People who dealt in opium got rich as well. So Fang Runin is basically raised by opium farmers, but what she really wants to do is get into the military academy to fight for what she believes in, and she pretty much does everything in her power to get herself there, including self-mutilation, which is kind of disturbing, but that just kind of like, you know, prepares you for what's in the rest of the book. And what I love about this book is as she gets into the military academy, that's where she learns that she has a power of shamanism, and it's a really rare power, and a lot of the tutors and her teachers do teach her this power because it's so rare. She has a skill in it. What happens when she gets into this academy is that there's all these other students who are way more privileged than her in terms of class, in terms of social status, and in terms of what they're born into as well. And she finds being into this military academy that she still has to compete, and she still has to fight for everything that she has and believes in. And then later on in the book they obviously go through, you know, war, and it's really brutal, it's really disturbing, it's really confronting, but it does go into those military wartime tactics, and a lot of these tactics are inspired by Sun Tzu. So oh my gosh, it's so good. This fantasy world is, you know, inspired by modern Chinese history, and I thought that was really interesting. And it actually covers the Rape of Nanjing, which is a really dark time in Chinese and Japanese history. So that's something that's not covered at all, that you don't learn at school, and it's really confronting. So if none of the trigger warnings bother you about this book, I really inspire you to pick it up, especially if you love like wartime fantasy reads, especially if you love reads like The Name of the Wind that features a magic school and about students learning to harbour their skill and going into war after and becoming classmates. And it does feature like a bit of an enemies to lovers slow burn romance. It's not quite a romance yet, but oh my gosh, it is such a good book and I really recommend it. So these are 6 of my favourite Asian reads. I hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts on all of them. Let me know in the comments down below what your favourite Asian inspired read is, and let me know if you pick any of these up, guys, because they're some of my favourite books, so I would love to know if you do and if you do enjoy them. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks guys, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.